Recorded, yes. This is recording? Yep. Yeah, this is recording on the clouds. So it didn't give it this different meaning, I guess, the other meaning. So you can share your screen. Bonsoir tout le monde. Is that loud enough? Hello? Bonsoir tout le monde. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today again for one of our Montreal user group. Tonight we'll do the session in English. We have some great guests from Adobe, John Fate and Anthony Rumsey. Will present a bit more the mobile apps, which is our tonight's topic. As usual, I present some snippets, around our community. The first one, we were at the Adobe Symposium in Toronto on June 6th. One of our team organization member, Eric Thibault, was there. That's this guy. He rocked it. He was one of the speakers. So he represented Montreal and Toronto, but also the Montreal user group. So we're really proud of him. Also, our Montreal user group is really reaching out internationally. So we were invited to see in New York for the user group there, and as well as the newbie, so the one in Paris. So again, Montreal user group is definitely branching out and spreading around the world. So we're happy about that. And on that note, tonight is the first time that we are live broadcast on the Adobe Worldwide community across North America. So smile to the camera. You guys are filmed. The screen is shared as well. It will be recorded, so we can share as well the recording after the and finally, again, Gartner reports, Forrester reports, placed Adobe ahead of everyone on different reports in the Q2 of 2017. So we're very proud of that and continuing with Adobe. And as well, the revenues, indicates the growth of the share and confirm the performance of Adobe and let us continue on that trend.
This is hot off the press.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it came out this afternoon. I'm going to leave the stage to Val Sergent, who will give a little intro, and then we'll continue with the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. All right, thank you so much. Quick intro. First, thank you for showing up. I know we are competing with lots of events. What I heard is that next door, the Red Hot Chili Peppers are singing tonight, so I'm continuing with that. And as you know, in Quebec, school is out on June 24th, so this is the last week of school. So we're competing also with every ballet show, every acrobatic show, every dance show out there. So many people said, we can't join, but can you share the recording afterwards? So that was one of the ideas for the incentives to record this event. So Steve Jobs introducing iPhone. When was that? Seven? iPhone is exactly 10 years old. So next week, it will be exactly 10 years old. It was the beginning of a new era. And right after this will happen, 2008, #1 application was, you may remember. And then this happened, 2011. Those are the revenues generated by the IFRART application, 2011. So just to say that any industry or any innovation has to begin with some maybe futile applications. I was looking at this. I was looking at those two peaks, by the way, in January 2010, and so I was looking at this, and at some point I said, I'm wasting my time. Maybe my mind is drifting away. So let's go back to more serious business. And then what happened is this. Mobile has become a specialty. Agencies develop around mobile. magazine, conferences, and commerce was considered to be separate kinds of commerce. And ultimately, it contributed to the fact that mobile has become silo. In many organizations, it become more and more isolated. Whereas if you look really deep down, what we try to achieve is open up the silos. What I'm showing here is the customer journey. Right? Very classically, on the x-axis, you have time. On the y-axis, you have engagement. And how you need, through hundreds, maybe thousands of points of contacts, progress towards more engagement with your clients, regardless of the touch points. So typically, this is the progression you want to give to your audiences. Obviously, you constantly have to measure everything through a consistent system, hopefully. And then you have to make the UX improvements, and we talk about UX as user experience in general. That is not necessarily colors and pixels. It's the whole experience, the whole engagement, the chronology of how people live with the technology in order to reach your goal. So if you boil it down, we end up with this. That is, we have three major problems as well. One is acquiring new clients. That is, people who don't know us, how can we be visible to them? And once we acquire them, how we can transform or activate them, again, through multiple channels. And once activating means that they did the first transaction with us, just one transaction, maybe it's $1, maybe it's reading one important paper with us, or maybe it's enrolling in a course. Depends on how you define success there. And once they did the first transaction is, okay, the second and the third, and ultimately the other transaction, how can you have some retention through this? So deep down, no matter what the silo or the touch point is, whether web, mobile, email, and so on, this is what we're trying to achieve. Though what happened in recent years is this. This is what Scott Brinker is. He has a website called Chief Martech. He updates this chart every year. So this is from last month. Over 5,000 products. One does mobile marketing, the other one does mobile advertising, the other one does mobile analytics, and the other one does analytics, not mobile, and on you go. And then you have a mosaic of little ghetto technologies that don't really connect together. This is what Adobe suggests now, is a simplified cloud. You have three major products, three family of products: Marketing Cloud, Analytics Cloud, Advertising Cloud. And down below, you have a very properly architected, unique solution down below, based on best practices. So the summary is this. Either you have an assembly of one-trick ponies, or you have one consistent platform. And this reminds me of this. We're going back to the iPod. You remember probably those MP3 players 10, 15 years ago that did lots of things, that had lots and lots of features. And then the iPod came. It was one consistent, no-nonsense system. Ultimately, it was probably a bit more expensive than the other products on the market. But in the end, it was much less expensive once you consider your enjoyment, your productivity, and the total cost of ownership. So once we say that mobile is not a silo, it's not an isolated department tool, does it mean that the app is dead? There are great articles of recent 2 years here about whether it's from Gartner, from Caltech, from analysis that says, listen, let's re-question this mobile applications. If you look at data, in green, on the left-hand side, you have that 14% of all users use mobile through a web browser. So the majority, 6% of all users, use the mobile applications with mobile applications, that is native applications, as opposed to just Chrome or Safari. So how can we elaborate on this? Because very often we are in discussions about whether we should go web responsive or mobile app. It's either or. So let's unravel this a little bit. On the left-hand side, in green, you have mobile web. That is, it's just a platform that provides the content that you can consume in the web browser. Those are great, in fact, for customer acquisition situations. People who don't know you will suddenly, through search, through a number of ways, through clicking through an ad or a link, end up on your site, which is responsive and provide valuable information in the appropriate context. This is very popular in what's called showrooming these days. That is going in a store and eventually comparing prices. But these guys don't have the time to install applications. They go on your mobile website and eventually social sharing, because those content can be very uniquely, atomically shared. So many advantages on that side. On the right-hand side, however, you do have the retention and loyalty cases. Because once clients know you, now you need to develop a more intimate relation with them, and you have to better serve them. So this is an installed application that is at the tip of the fingers that can leverage new technology and hardware peripherals. Eventually, you can have offline use. So in terms of the speed and responsiveness in terms of UI interactions, nothing beats that mobile application. So in most advanced cases, a mobile web would be too sluggish and does not foster as much retention as a mobile application. So if we agree with this, that it's not either or, but most probably, there are unique cases, of course, but very often you need to do both. On the left-hand side, with the platform I showed you, with AEM and Adobe Experience Manager and so on, it's a no-brainer. It's a given. Like, you don't need to work hard in any way to make the green part happen. It's a standard today. Now, today we will be focusing on the mobile application portion, so it's this blue portion here. And this is my last slide as a segue to Anthony and John. Very often in discussions, you have this kind of dichotomy. That is your application informational or is it transactional? It's either or. Again, it's a black and white discussion we have. Which, honestly, I don't think useful in any way, because a useful application has both and should have both. Let's look at this case. Imagine that you have a cab company and you have this mobile application. Typical use case would be that a client would just get out of the office, be on the sidewalks, and it's raining or it's cold, wants to order a taxi. So as you open the application, you have to be in a very spontaneous, immediate transaction mode. Find me a taxi right now. And then you monitor the distance to the meeting point eventually. So you are in a hurry, you're stressed out. But once you sit in the taxi and eventually you're in traffic, you can have a conversation with them. So this on the left-hand side now. I mean, is there a welcome offer for the first ride? Are there any benefits for the membership? You know, and there are so many things that you can discuss while you have, quote unquote, the captive client. In fact, you have the attention of the client. Let's make good use of it. And eventually the client will be switching from the transactional mode, like sharing an ETA or paying, and going back to what is the best offer at this point, and what should I consider a membership? So the right-hand side is extremely important, we agree. That's operational. This is customer service. This is really because the client is not having the energy back. But if you look closely, actual revenues are generated on the left-hand side. Right? The new revenues, the fresh revenues come from there. So that's the impossibility to dissociate both. So today, John and Anthony will be precisely talking about these kind of use cases where you have applications that can do something smart, something very direct, but at the same time, where you need content velocity, you need content targeting, and you need your marketing teams to be as productive as possible with those mobile applications. With this, I think there's John.
Is this work? Hello? Is this working? Great. So firstly, thank you for the invitation to speak today. Just maybe a little bit more of a background on Anthony and I. So we are longtime Adobe developers. We've come from the lifecycle business, then the AM business, and we've immersed ourselves in the mobile story. So we've been working very closely with customers and partners for 5-6 years now across the Adobe Marketing Cloud, solving problems. So although we're here and we have the story that we're telling today, feel free to reach out to us and we'll have that conversation afterwards if you have any other questions. We've done a lot of interesting things related to mobile and ADM that we'd love to share as well. And then Anthony, so I'll start out with AM Mobile, and then Anthony will jump into content services. And we'll try to cover as much as we can, but again, we like to focus on the questions. I find that's where more of the interactivity will arise, and we'll be able to dig into some situations or case studies that might be relevant to the experiences that you're going through at the moment. So we'll start with AM Mobile, then content services, and then a little bit deeper into content services. It's new, it's getting the hype, so there are likely questions about that and how you can take advantage of content services, how you can use those with the technologies within AM that you're already using, and of course, Q&A at the end. I'll also show a brief video demo of a team, that internal team, that happened to pick up the content services, play with it, and they created a pretty cool demo that I can talk through. And when we talk about the journey and the customer journey and trying to merge and blend those experiences on the device and go beyond either a traditional kind of content app or transactional app, I also have kind of a story at the end I can share as well with a financial company that we worked with recently that was taking their content-centric app and really wanted to make it more engaging and have more of a variance in how a user interacts with it as they're trying to sell services to a customer that might be relevant to some in the audience. So AM Mobile, it's an easy way to build a mobile experience, deliver value content to your users, effectively manage your apps. There are several customers that have dozens, perhaps hundreds of apps, whether they're internal or external, they want to manage. They don't often have visibility in where those apps are, how many they even have because of the organizational structure. We've seen that slide earlier with silos, and we're finding that although some of those silos are being broken down, people are still organizing their business in that way, and each department may have its own app. They may use, they don't even share code components. Even if they're on AM, they may not share very easily. So those organizational barriers are always going to be a challenge, but hopefully bringing them all into one system where you can effectively see them managed in one spot will help with that problem. And of course, retention. It's one thing to, if you're an enterprise and your users have to install the app, it's another if you have customers and users that you're trying to encourage to install your app. And you definitely want to retain those users and being able to engage with them afterwards in a content velocity, deliver new content, push notifications, keep them engaged. Because we often talk about attribution. I hear that often with the retail case. How do you attribute a click or a purchase to something that happened? Well, we're actually hearing a different version of an attribution problem. It's trying to get dollars spent for mobile. And how do you attribute some of the success in the business to the mobile app or to the mobile experience you deliver, so that we can get additional funding to really take that app further. So it's even more of an attribution from an internal perspective to help drive that business further. And again, with journeys, of course, we've been on a journey ourselves. By show of hands, how many in the room have heard of DPS, AM apps, some of the older brand? Okay. So this tries to just articulate a little bit sort of where we've come from. Traditionally, the digital publishing side had their mobile solution that came from the media side of Adobe, and then there was the marketing side. And of course, with everything else, there's synergies in not only the stories that we were telling, the customers that we were working with, and they eventually converged to become AM Mobile. And with that convergence, we also started to blend the technologies, bring in some of the core capabilities into the AM Mobile. And most recently, we've also started to look at content services and other things in the AM platform to reuse content more easily, regardless of channel. This is probably familiar to most people with a typical kind of AM solution, but of course, we're bringing AM Mobile into the picture. So traditional, website, no mobile story would have AM author, AM publish. It's not very different for a mobile delivery through AM Mobile. We still can use AM, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, to author your content, and your marketers can get involved with delivering that content. However, for AM Mobile, we actually host it through the AM Mobile services, which allow us to do several things, which I'll have slides on. And that content is then delivered to your mobile app to deliver that mobile app experience across the different platforms and in an easy to use and deliver way. Of course, the whole time incorporating Marketing Cloud to drive that engagement and attribution, targeting, and the experience with your end users. We don't have a lot of terminology in AM Mobile, which just shows us how simple and basic it is. There's very few building blocks. We basically talk about content, collections, and designs. And for content, it's basically an article, which allows you to package up HTML. Article is just sort of an artifact of the old naming, but really it's just an HTML piece of content. And banner can be used both for a design element within a page, where you can have an image. There's also dynamic banners now, which can be HTML, and it can drive you to other areas in the application. So it's partly design, partly content and navigation. And collections, of course, are a way to group articles and banners. That content can be found within many collections, so you can reuse content across collections. And collections actually drive the navigation as well, drives the native experience around accessing that content for your users. When it comes to design, when we speak about the native navigation, what we've done is try to give designers an editor, a tool that's very powerful for them to really customize how that content will actually render itself within a browse experience. And it can change across collections and stuff like that, so you can really deliver the experience that users will love and expect. And that's done through cards and layouts. So very few terms, and more on the content structure. The content just flows into collections, and there's a concept of a home collection. So you organize the content in such a way, and that actually drives the navigation as well. So the one comment I made earlier where, if we have time to talk about that story where we wanted to make it a little, the experience a little more variable based on the user that's interacting with it, using things like local storage, smarter HTML running those articles. You don't have to necessarily have very fixed paths through this, and you can take advantage of that to really deliver some unique experiences. So this is the design editor, and by show of hands, has anybody actually implemented or gone through the design experience here? Powerful, easy to use. Oh, I don't know if you're on. Okay, we'll move on.
There's a little bit of a learning curve.
Okay.
Yeah, after a little bit of stuff.
Yeah, it is a design tool. So what I've heard is, you know, the HTML designers are used to kind of like AN, HTML authoring, and this design tool is kind of more coming from the creative side of Adobe. So maybe if you're kind of like an illustrator and design, Photoshop person, you'll appreciate that more. So it does vary, and that's some of the feedback that we've heard. But the idea is that you have full control over how things are laid out with respect to the content, and you can place content in different ways. So that's designing, again, getting the look and feel of the application. And of course, authoring. In this particular case, we're dealing with Experience Manager that has integrations with AM Mobile, to push content to AM Mobile. And it's all the good things we already know about AM, or hopefully already know about AM, around template and component-based drag and drop, you know, content, design, reuse, customizable, extensible. You can deploy new services, extend UI, extend the consoles, anything that you need to do to either deliver in experience on the device for your end users, but not restricted to that. You can also customize and extend AM in order to make the authoring workflow easier for your authors. So you may have some power users or some very unique workflows that you want to really restrict users in that workflow, so that way they don't maybe go too far outside of it, because AM has a lot of capabilities. You can customize that experience, so you can benefit from that both on device and in the back office while you're creating that content. And we author the app, we design the app, we're building the app. So with AM Mobile, we make it easy to actually build these native apps, and you can sign them and then put them into the App Store, provide all your branding, and it's just wizard-based, try to keep it as simple as possible, yet have a very powerful outcome. And of course, the AM way, extending. We want to focus on being able to extend the behaviors, create custom components and templates, use Cordova plugins if you want to take advantage of some of the device capabilities, or do some of your own custom plugins to either take advantage of the device processing, device capabilities, or just do something unique that maybe you need to access some native capabilities. So the theme of extending has always been very important for AM, to be able to empower you to deliver more value in a quicker time frame. And we spoke earlier about managing applications. You may have a lot of applications to manage. You have users that maybe don't engage with the system very often, so you want to keep it simple, so that way when they are there, they can get what they're trying to accomplish done quickly. And you can create applications, manage the content, manage your integrations with other systems if you integrated and aggregated content that's outside of AEM. You can also deliver new tiles. Actually, Anthony has a blog, Git repo of an example of create new tiles. So, you know, we always talk about authoring and the experience on the app, but there's a lot more to delivering a mobile experience than simply just creating content and putting it out there. And you want to be able to do that retention and that high velocity content updates. So you may want to put other tiles in here that surface up information to help make business decisions. You know, whatever you think you would need to surface up to the author, you can create a custom tile and place it there, whether it's informational, graphs, charts, stuff like that, or things that speed up the workflow with links to things that they need to get to, or provide custom actions that will run custom code, custom workflows that may do some automation. We have a lot of stories in retail and others where a lot of the content creation and management is in fact automated using APIs, and a lot of that can be driven through custom processes. And the app lifecycle management, of course, we want to, I have a similar slide to this, more around the phases of design, build, deliver, analytics where you analyze, and then post-production where you're doing that retention. This is more around the life cycle of the app itself and being able to have the quick turnaround, content velocity, and engagement, and keep the users involved with the application, of course, because in the end there's always a goal. If you're putting a mobile experience out, there's a goal in mind, whether it's to drive revenue, drive engagement, deliver content, or a whole mix, and you want to make sure that you always revisit those goals and make changes to the application to optimize and deliver on those promises. We have a lot of slides, and we've worked with several customers and partners. We thought we'd throw in a couple. This is more on the financial side, so being able to deliver meaningful content to customers as well as sales tools. So there's different reasons why you would have more than one app. In this case, there's the value in bringing down the costs and increasing the efficiency in delivering content, not only for the end user, but also for sales associates being able to push the business forward. And Under Armour, heavy on the automation. They generate a lot of catalog information. There's a lot of products, and there's different variations depending on which region they're selling into, and their sales reps need to have access to the latest content, and it has to be done in a way that really helps sell the product, makes it easy for them. In this case, it's about making the sales associates app powerful enough that their job becomes easier and it results in positive outcomes. I'll now hand it over to Anthony for, well, actually, before we go to that, so we mentioned earlier some people have used aspects of a mobile. I just want to get a sense, has anybody actually, do you have an app in the App Store already that you might want to share with us and tell us, or even development? Just give it an opportunity for others to kind of participate in the sharing of stories. I see a couple of head nods. Are you in the App Store?
No, not yet.
Okay, development?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other projects on the go? Some considering? It was quiet, hungry, not hungry anymore? All right. Yes?
Quick question before you go. So you showed the authoring experience. So is there still a path from the design?
Yes, there is.
We have a number of magazines.
There's still the high affinity layout where you can still use InDesign to create those layouts that, although HTML has come a long way, there's still some things that InDesign can do. And plus, people often have design departments that are, very versatile with InDesign. So that workflow does still exist. There's actually some rumblings of some cool things coming out that I've heard recently where they want to do more with InDesign and HTML and that experience to perhaps build on that. But yes, that is part of it. I didn't show that. But in that one slide where we had AEM as the content authoring, in reality, it's other things. You could use another CMS. You could just use HTML and some tooling. You can use InDesign, PDF. All of those workflows for content creation that you're familiar with do exist. So I apologize for not including that slide as well. We have to pick some slides. But there is one that actually does show that with the content origin. Yes.
Side note question is in the way that you can use InDesign to just put in do you do that with Muse by any chance?
If Muse, I believe does Muse output HTML? I've seen some demos. Yeah, so I think in that case what you have is Muse would output HTML, and there's an HTML article packager that you can do that, and at the same time you could also incorporate Cordova plugins at that point. So yeah, any tool that can generate HTML can then be packaged in. The ones that come in other than HTML, such as InDesign or PDF, are treated a little differently. But any kind of editing tool that would do HTML would work the same.
For tracking, it's possible to use the same.
Yes, so AM Mobile embeds the mobile SDK, the AM Mobile SDK, and there are some custom dashboards for AM mobile apps because they build in some of the concepts like articles and collections to surface up analytics specific to the terms that are in use in that app. But it's also associated to the analytics. So we have something called Analytics Essentials, which basically ships with AM Mobile. If you actually are an analytics customer, you get access to a lot more. And you can still log in through the other dashboards and collect that and do all the customer reporting.
Here they use the term content velocity.
Yes.
We have a broad audience that it has, so I'm not sure everyone's fully ready.
Okay, so I'm sure we have a similar definition. So yeah, the question was if we can describe in more detail what we mean by content velocity. So one of the things that maybe wasn't clear in this is how quickly we can update the content. So content velocity is the velocity at which you can deliver content updates. And traditionally, in the kind of worst case scenario, somebody that had a mobile experience would maybe outsource it or to the mobile team or the IT people in the basement. And you have to make a request, and I need to change this. This is incorrect. You have to make a request that goes to that team. They do something in the basement. They say it's going to take X number of time, probably longer than it really takes. And you have to rebuild the application, submit it to the App Store. And at that point, either the change was required. If it was some hourly information on store hours or something like that, it could impact your business if it's incorrect. It could be information that should not have been published. You need to remove any number of reasons. Well, with this, as we talk about content velocity, it's the ability for an author, a marketer, somebody who's non-technical to go in, make the change. In absence of a content review workflow, which you could do with AM, where I can make a change, but perhaps I'm untrusted, maybe for one reason or another, it would then go into an inbox and Anthony would get an email say, are you okay with this change? Yes, then it goes to publish. But if I'm an elevated user, I can essentially make the change right now, hit the publish button, and my app updates. I don't have to go to the App Store. I don't have to talk to IT. If I'm dealing with a partner or a boutique shop, we don't have to reopen the contract and say, okay, well, we want to re-engage and we have this change, and perhaps you start to batch up your changes because you want to optimize the costs, and you don't have to make decisions like that because it's that easy. That anybody who has login access and has the right credentials, because that's the other thing with AMs, you can really control who can do what. So you can have people in groups so that some may be able to view or edit, but we make it as easy as possible to deliver content at the velocity that you need to create it. You're not inhibited in any way by the technology, by the platform, whether it's the iOS App Store or Google Play or anything like that. So that's maybe, I went too far describing it. Probably would have been sufficient with just a sentence or two, but I apologize if I went too deep into that one. But yeah, that's what we meant.
Examples for content localization.
Well, AM supports being integrated with Hybris, Magenta, I think. I don't know, I'm gonna look at Jazz or Nick.
There are 14 of them, so.
14, okay, so a lot. So there are integrations, and with AIM, it's very easy to do custom integrations as well. So, you know, if they're, I assume out of the 14, and maybe you can talk to Nick later, find out if, I believe Magenta is one of them. Yeah. But again, you can also do integrations very easy with AM to bring content in, aggregate content if you need to. In their particular case, they actually have their own system, and they're more automating around. A lot of their catalog was design driven, and they were just kind of having design drive that workflow. So the automation is kind of bringing design together with all the information to actually build a catalog, because they focus more heavily on design. And the e-commerce and retail part of it was kind of secondary. They're very design secondary.
Sorry, when you have a question, can you repeat briefly?
Oh, sorry, yes. Okay. Yes.
So living with is it possible to render it also as a web application?
So the question is, if you're building a mobile application, can you also render it as a web application? AEM makes it very easy to do a multi-channel. So you can reuse content in several ways. Typically what we've seen is you don't necessarily, we haven't often seen the same experience being targeted for web and for mobile. Usually on mobile, especially if you're on a phone, we've also seen that what people deliver to a phone is different, because usually your engagement with the phone is very different. You're on the subway, you're in between appointments. It's different than taking the time at a desktop to browse through a lot of content. So although you can do an exact experience or very close, we haven't seen it be exact often. We have seen those grabbing pieces from one experience and bringing it into the other, and it makes it easy to do that. So you can reuse assets. You can create and assets being like video, images, PDFs, text, and content fragments as text. You can also piece some of those together into experiences, which talks about experience fragments. So that takes all these little bits and makes it a sort of a higher order reuse. And you can reuse experiences, web, mobile, screens. We even see people start to do things like on Alexa now, and you can start to reuse. In the case of Alexa, obviously no visuals, but the data behind it. And you can also reuse content through like live copy. So AIM has features around live copy where you can actually create copies, and when you create those copies, you can make slight changes to it. So if you wanted to, for instance, go from web to mobile, what we've seen in the past as well, since we're talking about things that we work with customers through, that on web, people take for granted the computing power of desktops, although phones and stuff are getting better, but they might use things like jQuery or other libraries that are easy to develop against, but don't necessarily run very optimized on device. So although you can get the same look and feel, you may not get the same user experience on device. So when you do something like a live copy, you can have live copy rules where you could maybe optimize parts of it. So when you have a gallery in the web that doesn't really work very well on device, when you do the live copy, you can change the sling resource type. So for those that are deeper into AIM development, what that means is the content is the same, but what's rendering it is different on mobile, and you might have a mobile optimized gallery component. So you can have the same content on both, but they're being rendered slightly differently to take advantage or to optimize on the device. If you weren't maybe responsive in the web because your site is a little bit older, so when you bring it across, you might become responsive on the device to deal with the different device sizes. So in short, yes, it's easy to reuse content, and the typical AIM way, there's more than one way to do it, which is good. It empowers you. It's just being able to kind of work through which is the best fit, because it's not just reuse around content, there's different ways to reuse content, but also the strategies within the platform to do those types of things as well have several options. So if you have a specific case that you're working on, you definitely speak to us later. Maybe we can kind of point you in a direction or two, or some terms to look up and maybe find some samples.
A question about search.
Sure.
I just came across that the native search only finds articles. so it returns articles as search results, but the app we're putting together uses banners because we're using a lot of web resources.
Okay.
But the search doesn't return banners. I'm just wondering, I know this is kind of specific, but
Yeah, obviously follow up with me after. I'll take a note and we'll run that down because I know we were more heavily focused on the AM side, and now we're AM mobile even more than before. So we're getting more familiar with some of that backlog. So I can't answer right now whether it's supposed to be there and it's not working or it's not. But
I think it's a big part. It's
yes.
missing.
Okay.
If you're searching for something and you don't
Yep.
see it in the results, you think that it's not there.
Okay.
But it could be. It's just.
So please do follow up with me so I can make sure I at least get your contact information, and we'll try to run that down for you. Okay. So I think I'll hand it off to Anthony. If we still have other questions, of course, we can speak to those after he's done his part, and afterwards if you want to hang around. So I'll hand it over. Awesome.
So yeah, I'm going to take over talking about AM content services. We're going to stay in sort of mobile theme, but we're sort of moving away from the on-demand services now, looking at what sort of AM, and specifically AM 6.3, which is recently released, is offering in this space. So I'm going to talk a little bit how we get here. Why do we need content services? What is it all about? So generally, AM customers have a large amount of offered content, especially if they're long-time customers. And that content is probably going to be web content for pages and sites. It's probably also going to have a lot of assets, right? It's probably going to be tons of images, videos, depending on how heavy they're using AM for their content management solution. There's going to be a lot of content in there. As I probably talked about earlier, it's 2017. Mobile device has been around for a long time. You're generally going to want that content on a mobile device somehow. And future, even talking not even mobile devices, you're going to want that on any device, any channel, whether it has a screen or not. So there's content to be able to go anywhere. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. We also want to make sure that whole workflow is seamless. It shouldn't be difficult to deliver content to multiple channels. It's easy to create a page for a site. It's just as easy to reuse that content somewhere else or create content that can go to multiple places. And that's where we're talking. My last point here as well is just reuse. So we want to reuse and maximize the content as much as possible without having to recreate over and over again. So that's kind of why we're here and what I want to talk about around what content services is. So I guess just in a picture form, this is basically what I want to talk about is we've got a site. Why can't I have the same stuff on my site in my application? It might not look the same, but at least the content that's backing that should be able to go between the two very easily. So you might actually say, well, actually, I can do this today. If I have AM 6.0 or whatever, you can actually ask for any resource in the AM and give you JSON. Looks kind of like that. Sure, you could probably do something with that. Not the most elegant solution, but this actually kind of builds on what I'm talking about today. Is that AM as a content management solution already has built in a lot of capabilities that we can take advantage of and make easier and make and leverage and make life better. So we're going to dig into this a little bit more. Is okay, we've got a lot of data here for some particular resource in the AM. So what is content services going to give us then? It's going to give us that simple way to consume that content. But really what we're concerned about in these last few points here is it's independent of layout, channel, and repository. So whoever's consuming data should really care about where it is or how it's created. That's not its concern. And then secondary, John mentioned before, AM is good at this. We want to make sure it's configurable, extensible. So everything in AM, as it's given to customers, it's always the capabilities of extending and configuring is always there. So that's sort of the tenets of what content services is all about. So we sort of, what does that mean then? Back end, we obviously got AM as our back end, so that's what everyone hopefully knows and uses. But what we're doing now is decoupling the front end. So we're not, that content is not directly associated with a page on a website. Now we can sort of have content sort of be more fluid and you use in multiple experiences. So as I mentioned, any channel, that content can be still used for your study, but now we can also go to screens. But that also means now we can pretty much go to any mobile platform. We're not tied to certain platforms anymore. This content really is channel and platform agnostic. And even further than that, as I mentioned, it's really any, like if you take this for any device. A lot of talk about IoT devices now, right? Like Alexas or any other type of non-screen devices that might want to consume data. Right. So now we can point to that same resource, run it through content services, and you get something that looks like that. Now this is some data that's much easier to consume by, in this case, a mobile application. It's got a certain layout. It's following some kind of data model that the application then knows how to read easily, and maybe even traverse through different layers of that data in order to produce the experience at once. So you see here, there's no presentation being presented here like you might see in your typical sites. Well, all we're really doing is presenting that data in a way that the app can consume. We could, in part of the content services data, include presentation information if you want the app. You want the entire experience of the app to be driven by data with sort of few as the adventure of content services. Should point it here. So this is what I'm talking about here is it's all available today in AM 6.3. It was released under what they call preview because it was sort of implemented originally as a feature for mobile applications only as an initial feature. But there's work actually being done today, right now, to make it more part of the core platform. So that's why in 6.3, what we're seeing today was that as a preview. There's going to be a feature pack coming out as part of 6.3. It's actually going to take content services even further, make it core to the platform. Don't need a mobile license. If you have a 6.3 license, you get content services. So that's going to make it even more accessible and really it's part of the platform. But what I wanted today is really to talk about core concepts and ideals behind what content services is meant to be as far as AM is concerned. Some implementation details might change, but the core tenets of what it's meant to be is going to be the same. And this is where I want to talk now about some terms. So in 6.3 today, this is kind of how content services is built. We've got the concept of model. So this is where you're actually going to define whatever structure you want for your content. And you can also define index relationships as well. So you can sort of say, what I'm actually going to create content based in a model, certain models can only be created under other ones. So that's for child-parent relationships. Simple things like that, which are already common in AM when you're thinking about like templates, pages, or something, if you're familiar with those. And then we have entities. So these are the actual content. These basically become the endpoints for your for the data to get out. So your entities can be organized into things called spaces, so that we can group actual content together in order to be delivered to your channels. And then banks, they use JSON a lot because that's sort of the facto standard nowadays for consuming data. But you could actually output other data formats too if you have some specialized data formats that you want to output. But for now, we're going to focus on just the JSON rendering success of content services by default. And then again, everything is configurable and extensible, so you can sort of have full control depending on the specific needs. I should also mention there is an ability to actually tie this into the content sync as well, which is a core feature of AM. So instead of delivering JSON directly to your the consumers of this, you can actually package it up through content sync, which means you can actually send zips of data down to your applications, and you can actually start building an offline story if you want, and you can start actually doing sort of the whole Delta updates and all that functionality as well. So there's a few options there, again, tying into core features that AM already has. So I got a few slides now, really just to sort of talk about what these topics a little more. One of the first reasons we did content services was around extending content. What that means, and I sort of talked about this at the beginning, was we've got a lot of content in AM already. So number one priority was to reuse that content, in a way that doesn't make you build that content again. So that means reusing your sites, reusing your assets. You probably, in most cases, if you're AM customers, you probably have a site, and it's a pretty good use case of why people are going to AM. So that's probably been a lot of investment there with building out pages and templates, and you've probably got lots of different custom components that you're using to build out your sites. So content services doesn't want to have to change any of that. You should be able to tap into that and output that data in a different form. Same with assets. You've probably already built out some complex directory structures under your DAM, so you don't want to be able to mess around with that. You still want to get out those assets for different purposes. And there's going to be some out-of-the-box models that I'll show you that handle that. So again, you're going to have to create models if this is all you care about. And this is the case for sites. There's an out-of-the-box page model that allows you just to basically point to any app of your site. Depending on out of the box, you can probably get decent data. You can get, again, customize it, but maybe creating some custom components in order to generate the data to be a little different. There's a few items there. And on the same side as assets, there's an assets model out of the box, which allows you basically to go in, take any assets you want from wherever they are in your data structure and build out a new entity for those assets. So those assets can be in different folders, doesn't really matter. Basically now picking and choosing the assets you care about for whatever this entity custom service you can use for it. Actually, I got demos at the end. John even has a demo too. So hopefully all this top high level stuff will make more sense and you can just kind of show it in action. But I'm just trying to go at least through all the concepts and talk a little bit what all this is about. That actually brings me down to models. This is where it gets really interesting because now we're really giving the users of content service the power to do whatever they need to do to make their life easier. So models is the first step. So this is where you can basically describe how your content needs to be created. And what we're talking about here is basically defining properties of the data, relationships of that data. So if you're familiar with it, sort of data modeling in general, this is sort of what the model concept is all about, is constructing how you want your data to appear. And still allowing your content authors to play a role in this. And that's where we come into entities. So entities are really where your content authors get to start playing. They can create entities. And this is very analogous to page creation in AM. So content authors will have to create pages depending on their ability, their rights and the abilities. There's always parent-child relationships there, so they go and create pages in certain places. Entities really follow similar concepts. You can, they're all backed by models, so that defines how they're going to appear and how they're going to be rendered out. But you can start doing very creative things now, because now you can actually start combining entities together and using different models. You can actually build out some really interesting complex structures without having to do a lot of work. And again, I mentioned before, entities really are the rendering endpoint. So entities are what you're going to be pointing to in order to get data out of the system. I think that's it. Yeah. So what I want to do now is sort of walk you through what I just talked about. So I'm going to jump into AEM. I want to now start looking at creating some models and entities, and we'll walk through how that data is going to change, and we'll go from there. Fresh. Already fired up my AM here somewhere. All right. So assume most of you here are familiar with AM. So we're going to be playing the AM UI. I hope everyone's seen it a little bit, but if not, you sort of learn as we go. So this is the mobile dashboard that's available in the AM, and I'm going to be playing with this new app here I've got called WeMix. So it's So little demo app that I created. This is a mobile dashboard that John had a slide of earlier. This is customized for this application. And you notice there's a tile here about managing our entity contents. This is now basically all we've done is we've related some content services data now to this application. And let's go look at some of the new stuff here. I'm going to go into, sure, I'll open one of these up. So what I'm actually concerned, I'm going to go start by creating a model. So I'm just going through the AMUI now, and I'm going to play the role as someone that wants to create some data models that then you can have some content created from. So I'm going to find my model. So this is all UI. All right, so I already have some. I'm going to create a few new guys here. Make sure I have my text right. First I'm going to create is recipe. I'm going to, as part of this app, basically it's like it's a drink, enthusiast app. That's what I was looking for. And basically, what we want to do is create some recipes. So we want to create an app that's going to have some recipes for drinks in it. So we need to create a model that will allow that to happen. So first thing I'm going to do is create a group. So this is what I was talking about managing, creating relationships. So we want to create a group that says, okay, I want to have a place that recipes can live in. So this is pretty simple. Not much here to do. And get that for later. Sure. Oops.
And this modeling can kind of have it two ways. Depends how the teams work together. If it's sort of coming from a developer first, they may say, here's what I want the JSON to look. And then you start to model it to generate the JSON. If maybe the developer has the power, if it's more the marketer has the power, they'll create a structure that they think makes the most sense, and the developer just has to deal with the JSON.
Yeah, it's a good point. Is it?
Because groups mean something. In group here, you're grouping like things, but in this concept of the JSON, you're creating a substructure that is, one entity.
Yeah, once we go to hopefully when we go to the entities, it'll sort of make sense how this all flows together because we can actually see the JSON. So that's all I did. All I did right now is I create a thing called a group that's only allows drink recipes as a child. And that's what I want to create now. So I'm going to create another model. To show a point here, what we're doing here, these are out of the box. There's sort of two model types. Again, that's accessible. You can create your own model types if you need to. And you see, if I create this guy, you'll see why. Because basically, once you go into model types, that's sort of defining data types and all the different components that are available to that model. So if you create some new data type that you care about, you create a new type. I can't spell, I don't care. All right, and I can go edit this guy's. I think I went to edit mode already. Sure, I'll do this first. So this is now, we're actually in the data model editor. So now we basically find what properties are in this model. I'm not going to do a lot because we don't want to get too long here. But we can create a Boolean value. Maybe we want a number in there. Maybe we want a string, and that would be like maybe we want to build to rate things. So we'll call this our rating. And it's a recipe, so we actually got to put in instructions.
So depending on the disciplines in the room, we're creating a structure, we're creating a schema, we're creating a form, sort of whatever the term that kind of resonates the most.
And I don't want to, it doesn't have to be perfect for demo. So we got some stuff in there.
All this is not yet in 6.3.
6.3?
Yeah.
this is all in 6.3 now, but I mentioned before, but they've released it as a preview, so people can play with it and sort of get a feel for what content services is for their needs. But they take the preview label pretty much means I don't want to go in production because there might be backwards compatibility issues if they decide to change the data structure.
It came out as part of the mobile, the intent to be part of the mobile license. But it actually is not mobile specific. So AM said that no, it needs to be part of the core platform because the whole point is around content to be used from one company everywhere. So it's being pushed down to the content platform. Part of core at that time. So during the beta program, it was part of AM mobile, but at release time, it was core. They made a preview. I think it's documented how to enable it. I think it's disabled by default. You have to go into a setting and turn it on.
Yeah.
And and then so it's not no licensing restrictions around the mobile. It's part of core.
All right, so what I've just done there is, sorry, probably went too quick. So there is a new, this is John talking about, if you enable the content services feature in 6.3, basically what you're gonna get is this new Spaces console gets enabled. This is sort of what's hidden by default, but the Spaces console now is where your authors can go or your content creators can go and start making the content that makes sense for them. So, and I mentioned they're all backed by those models, right? So I just created a drink recipe model. So I can actually go create it here. So if I want to create something new here, and see, this is why if I don't spell right, things don't work. Because it's expecting things. Fine, I'll go change it. Yeah, I know, and I didn't think it mattered, but it does matter because it's expecting something to be.
Names matter in AEM because
There's my drink recipe. Drink recipe. No, it's the group.
your primitive type model is
I saw that one wrong too. So,
that's the second one, isn't it? That's one you're using.
yes. Yeah, I might be able to do it here. Oh, I can't select. Unselect. I think it's what I actually need is this guy's path. It's this guy here. It's spelled wrong. The relationship. So this guy is basically only allowed to be created under that group model I created, but it was already built, hard-coded in. So I'm going to go in here. This prove it's live, right? And you see this right here. It's only allowed to be a child of that path. But because I spelt it wrong, whoops. If I do that, just proves there's no smoke and mirrors. It's real stuff. So hopefully it works now. I'm gonna go back under my drink recipes. Got a bunch there already that I pre-built, but I should be able to create a new one. It's still a pass rate. No, you know what? It's because I half built this app already.
So I'll fill in some.
Yeah. Don't worry. Now I'm just trying to make it work, but it'll turn for
page creation where you create pages for certain areas. That helps enforce content structure for a site. In our case, it kind of helps enforce data integrity. So that way you can start to enforce rules around the way entities can be placed or created, such that you can help build up that JSON schema so it doesn't get too out of whack. So we're trying to still reuse the concepts that a page author would be used to, but for slightly different.
Sorry, in the mobile app, is it possible to use some personalization or testing that it is
For A/B testing, you can with target integration, you can use certain things with A/B testing and targeting. I've also seen some people that it's not a complex A/B kind of test. In fact, you can use something like content services or something like that, where if you want to just simply change your behavior on a page, you could have, so if you were doing entities for actual content, but there's other reasons you would create entities. So you could create entities to drive behavior, maybe more so like hybrid or native app, where you might have an entity that says show tab bar, no show tab bar, background color, things that are visual in the app or A/B testing. Like if you have use location sources to find it, then in this location do this, you can create a model and an entity that allows an author to control those inputs. So it's a way for the app developer, app designer to expose controls to the author to say, we're going to create this behavior where we can fork behavior based on some criteria. We'll create an entity such that the author can then engage, do that. So you don't, that doesn't have to come tell me to say that I used to do that. They can simply go in here, edit an entity, and flip something to true, false, change something, and then when the app gets that content update, you can make that change. So there's different variations of that use case, and that's what I just want to get a point that these entities, we show them in a certain context, but really all it is separating design or view from model. And when you separate the model, you can then sort of make sure that the different disciplines that are engaged with content creation can focus on their areas. This way now, the designer focuses on design, the data person focuses on data. And part of that data could drive behavior, could drive content, could drive experience, whatever the case may be. So it's really sort of that simple that it can be used for anything. If there's any reason, you just want to expose some editing capability. But for A/B testing, it's more, as you get more complex, you probably want to start looking at target. The target integration with AIM mobile, I think is limited at this time through the hybrid app or through mobile service SDK. Or I should have it back to fix the fix.
Well, because I reinstalled the package, so I always have packages available. But anyway, so what as John was saying, now we're in the create entity space. We've only got the one model available to us, so that's making sure, at least on the content creation side, you're being limited to what you can create. So, you know, whatever, we can create a new drink, everything else. You can start tagging things if you want. We'll create it, open it. Now, hopefully what you see is the model is what we just designed earlier. So we're now presenting that, that model properties to the content authors so they can actually do whatever they need for this particular case. So I assume they like theirs, so you can get a high rating, and then you can start, you know, adding the steps that they need, and so forth. And there's even, and then now we can actually start previewing it. So we can right away you can sort of see quickly what how it's going to look. But the more interesting, if we can actually, like sort of, the final step here is to sort of show what basically that endpoint's going to look like. So now we've actually, with your URL, we've actually just pointed to some now resource in AEM that's been exposed as a content services data endpoint, and the JSON that gets out now is a representation based on the data types that were picked by the model, and just see how that comes around. And we can even go if you can go a bit higher up, because maybe, you know, that on its own isn't not a lot of context, right? But maybe this is, maybe you say, okay, whatever, this app ability really just wants to see all the recipes, you know. So there's that whole, now you have that whole hierarchy, so we can actually ask for that JSON. Now it gets a little more interesting. Now you can actually say, okay, you can sort of start seeing how that data can be used now in an application, whatever that application has to be. Mobile application, definitely no channel, but there's multiple choices. You can now start saying, okay, now you get a list of data following a very precise model, so you can easily, you know, iterate over these things and know you're going to get a consistent format all the time. And in this case, there's even some discoverability built in, because you say, okay, I've got a bunch of drink recipes here. Okay, I know the name, but that's not, maybe obviously you want to know more about them. You can, this is only one way to do it. There's this sort of a flat JSON approach where each level adjacent actually tells you how to go find more information.
Do the cast off file.
Yeah, so exactly. So there's the JSON provides discoverability to go deeper, but again, if you don't care about that, you know, the built-in features of content services allow you to sort of drill in as well. So again, it's up to you how you want that data to be presented to the application, whether the application prefers it in this way, or maybe prefers it in a more smaller piece of data that you can sort of drill in deeper depending on what you need. So in this case, because you can start, you can start seeing everything. So we've got this huge long list of data, which represents all our drink recipes, and you can see right away the instructions and the ratings for them, and then hopefully pretty easily see now how that data could be consumed by mobile application. The interesting thing, that data could actually even be consumed by a website too. Like maybe you have a single page application, right? That's very data driven through JSON. It could be using content services data as well. So again, the review story sort of goes both ways, not just from AAM to mobile apps, but you can just go from AAM back in AAM again for a site. So that was sort of that story for content services. Definitely get questions, and then John has one more demo to basically show how it actually looks in the app. Yeah.
Can you put the mixed content, like the content that I wanted to have, let's say, a superscript, I want to say, or a subscript, CO2. I want to put this
In your data, that would be, you could have you could put like your JSON pattern could have, you would have like rich text or something like as one of the properties. Right now this is all plain text. There's no reason why it couldn't one of the properties can be rich text, as long as whatever's consuming the data knows it's rich text. And you could have indicators in there saying, field X is a rich text field if you need to. So that way, whoever's consuming that data just knows, okay, I've got to run that through some kind of rich text processor first to display it.
That's one of the types you have. Rich text. When you get the model.
No. So and this again, partly because it was there were the time constraints and it was a preview release. If you go back to the modeling, that's why kind of why we named it primitive types, because we didn't. Let us go edit one of these guys.
So like everything in AM,
It's extensible. So yeah, and we have we do have an example of adding data.
yeah, so there's some fixed set of data types that made it into preview, but the intent is that this would be built up by the core team. But as well, if you had a custom data type to create more complex structures, you could do that. And through modeling, since we're sort of talking about modeling, you can do the simple modeling. And if you wanted to nest it, like if you look at the path, the field name, so you can do things like dot and create a path. So what that'll end up doing, if I set for instruction, I could say dot simple / instruction, and then I can have several text fields, but they would all write to that path. So you end up starting to create a nested structure, even though it's flat here, because that path, just like other AM paths, you can create a substructure. So then your JSON would come down and you can start to create groups by creating a syntax for your paths. You can also create complex data types so that you can drag it in and kind of have a form within a form if you want to do complex things. Or you can do nested models. So if I had like an airport model, I can then create terminal models as children. Or I have an airport model and create a terminal data type added. So at this point, with AM is unfortunately it was just the same answer. Leave it open, and because it is preview, eventually the community will tell us which one becomes more popular as far as using nested paths to create a substructure, or whether using parent-child relationships to create a substructure, or which data types that write themselves in substructures. So there's kind of 3 ways to do it, and
pretty much like property name really just boils down to a node name. It gets written out as a node name. So your property name could be a path if you wanted to have it nested. There's a lot of options again. It's just figuring out the path that makes sense for your use case. That's.
If the entity is created as a node in the GCR, or is it just a JSON?
It's nodes.
It's
Everything is, they're all created as nodes, so then it's using just built-in, Sling rendering to render it out as JSON. So the JSON sort of rendered at it's created a render time.
Yeah, the intent was that we've often worked with partners and customers in the past that were trying to get more data reuse, and we were pulling data out of pages to make it easier to manage and reuse, either for one use case or either for, I don't want the person that managed, like if it was a credit or a financial service and we're creating bank accounts. I want the person that owns the bank account that defines the description, the interest rate and all that stuff, to not be bothered by layout. Because right now if you're editing a page, you're going to do layout and content at the same time. But we've seen that in some cases it's a different user, they want to have them separated. So we separate the model from that. And then what you'd end up doing is building an EM component that would then point to one of these entities. So they would just drag in, okay, I've designed this great layout that knows how to render credit cards, but the credit card was defined by somebody else. It's now an entity. And I would just drag the component in and point it to say it's our premium card. So we're just pulling the data into a component, and our component does the rendering. So we've started to do that separation. So we're reusing concepts like parents and children, Sling, nodes. It's all the familiar stuff that an AEM developer would be familiar with, as well as an AEM author, because the concepts are very similar. When we saw the JSON, just to touch on that, Sling selectors, like being able to do like a dot depth or a dot config. So if we were generating a quick list view, we don't need verbose JSON. So we might create a new custom config that's called .list.json that strips out everything we don't need and only gives us the pieces that we do need. So we're optimizing the JSON. Whereas when we're actually doing a page rendering of it, we would maybe do a .verbose or a .all. And maybe we need to know the Sling resource type because the developers want us to do something different depending on the resource type. So we can also filter properties out or add properties. So that one image that Anthony showed had that ugly, what we think is that ugly JSON that has everything in it. Maybe there's something in there that you need. So you can create custom configs to either filter, aggregate, and like AEM, you can always override anything. So if we were trying to reuse some content and there's a type, you created a custom data type called credit card, and somebody wanted to change something, you could actually deploy a Sling servlet that when it sees that we're rendering a credit card, you can override it and say, I'm going to hijack this and either aggregate it or replace it. So that way you have even more control over what the JSON looks like. So you can not only configure it, you can override it or extend it. So unfortunately, it's kind of that simple, but also because it allows you to do everything, it's in some cases, to a developer, that's like, oh yeah, that's cool, it's simple, but somebody else may go, well, that's kind of complicated because you can do too many things with it. But I guess it follows the AEM way.
It's simple until you need to do more. Like this is the site use case, right? So it's as simple as we pointed just to some path in sites. I can open that.
Yeah, by default, for a site, it knows sort of what's important, what's not. It'll filter for you. But if you think differently, you can create a custom version.
So this is literally just going through that site's tree and finding out things that is important.
So whereas with Sling, if you didn't like what Sling did, you had one option. You needed a developer to deploy a custom render. With content services, we try to find something in between. You don't need a developer until you really want to do something outside the box. There's the middle range now, it's called configuration, where you can go in and say, I want to exclude this property, I want to exclude this whole subtree of my JSON, I want to rename a property because I don't like the word JCR title, I just want a title to my developers. So you can start to do that with config. So we've sort of created a larger config for this? I don't know that we did for that. This is our summit lab material. But it is, you don't have to get into the developer as quickly now. You actually have some config options that you can play with.
How do entities behave
In preview, I'll let you answer that. The question was, how do the entities that you already created change when you change the model?
You want to add another field to your model?
Yeah, for example,
Do you want to know what it does or what we thought of doing?
Right now, what it would be would
I know
Correct.
AM, so
Yeah.
for every entity that was created already, it would just be an empty field. You have to go back into that entity.
Yeah, but the idea is that we would want to have kind of everything's based off references, so I'm not sure we can show that, but when you click on a model, you can check back references so you know who's using it. So the idea was from there we'd be able to say apply it, and you have a rule that says just leave it empty or insert with the default, so you have a default value.
I go back to this guy.
I guess if you remove something,
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
like
that's
the
it.
AM garbage,
it goes to.
you end up
You did
Yeah, so
more.
like if
Like if I can,
integral to the life cycle of the model and stuff like that, I can select something that's solved in the preview.
I can at
It's
least
extensible, so anybody can.
At least so it does have at least the references concept. So the model editor knows exactly everything that's referencing it. So I think, I don't know. Let me try this, probably not gonna work, because in theory, if I try deleting this, it won't let me, but maybe it will. I don't want to do it because it might kill it. Well, what's the worst again, right? There you go. So it won't let me. Phew. So it says there. Well, at least I can delete it because it's usage and references. So I'd have to remove all the references to that model before I could delete it. So and there is a relationship. So every entity knows what model came from. Every model knows what entity's using it. But if you edit in a model, those entities obviously are now sort of not reflecting the true model, because either you add or remove fields or change values in those fields. It can get really creative, get really complicated.
it's possible to update them so the field gets added. It's not too bad.
Yeah, if you were to add it, then if you went back and edited the others, you could change it.
I think it would get more complicated if you decide to change like one of the field names. So now all of a sudden, all your entities now some are using the wrong field.
Yeah,
names.
because there's a repository.
So you have to write some little automation there to sort of run through and update all your existing entities.
There's a good question back, question here.
There is a way to manage the regional content. Like it is in the
For language or
for language and regional content.
little again, it was more on the roadmap or something future.
Oh, so in the we have in the end there's the language copies, and you can send things out for translation. So that's in order to regionalize or translate page content. Entities are stored as page content, as are pages going to mobile articles. So the infrastructure is set up there for content services. It was sort of set in place where you can create folders for language variations, such that we could add language copies to that. For preview, it's not there. For the AM hybrid solutions, there is language copies. You can create different language copies and you can pull them down. So you can
But it's more for if we have a different content in Ontario or depending on the
Yeah, so
that's where spaces really would come in.
in content service, yeah. We were for a customer recently where what we ended up doing is you have different articles for the different regions and have different collections. So in the context of AM mobile, you would have different content trees. So what they had is there's Cordova APIs as well to query collections and articles. This is kind of boosted with customer recently. So you can then present like a language picker. If you can't, you can try to check based on the device, choose it for the person. But then they would switch to that language and it would go to a different branch in the collection hierarchy. And that way you can drive that language variance.
Yeah. So
that sort of follows the site's model where it's very similar content trees, but being in different language or different regions. You can choose that region. Over your sales associate, depending on what region you're going into, you can kind of switch the app. You provide an experience to do that, so that way you can go flip between one or the other and remember which one you're in.
So say whether you're building content in on-demand services or AM or solutions, both the solutions in both.
Yeah.
To manage sort of that regional content.
There's a question.
I just had maybe a general comment as to, so I see how the flexibility has part of the offer side of things, but you mentioned, they have the ability to change like the JSON, right? If content is already using or leveraging that JSON format, and it's expecting that key. And the marketer can literally go back into model, change that key, right? So if you have an app that's using that JSON, it would fail.
Yeah, you probably, it's like a schema, you don't want to change your model too frequently, because in the case of content services, you can reuse it across any channel. You can have, like a lot of websites actually, we're seeing now, people are going to single page applications. So they're doing that whole Ajax, bringing in JSON. So yeah, if they're expecting that JSON schema, usually that's the binding contract between, you know, the authoring environment and the
generally, marketers are not going to be even have access, because that's why models are managed separately. So there would probably be permissions in place, so a marketer couldn't even go and change a model if they wanted.
Generally, creating entities, most people would probably put apples in groups to make sure that they don't mess around with that. But that's correct. Like you could reuse an entity within the context of being a component that can be used across multiple channels. You can also have a single page application in your web app that maybe just consumes the JSON directly. So it's not as a means to through a component to deliver an experience. The actual experience is being determined in the app itself, whether it's a single page app or web or hybrid mobile, in mobile or native. So there's different ways to consume that. Most definitely that schema has to be consistent. What you could end up doing in that case is take advantage of the configs. So if you had two mobile apps, one of them is native, one of them is on demand, you have your website consuming components, and you have some single page application that does something else in an internal app. And they're all consuming content entities in different ways. And you had to make a change with all the extensibility that we talked about. You could have different configs. So you could have a .native.json or a .spa.json that renames the property to the one that you expect. So for whatever reason we decide we don't like the property named alcoholic, we want to change it to something else, but the other app team doesn't. They're a different team, different department. They can't change along the schema. What we can do is give the one that we're using, we can create a different config, and we can change the JSON output. So that way, although it's still the same entity, it's being delivered and filtered and changed on the way out such that they will all continue to work. So that's a strategy we could use in that situation.
So this is kind of like a content fragment, right? You're trying to bring all the content in one single area, you're using either on the web or on your mobile application and so on. Because technically, all those fields you can create in the web application and the default sling selector for JSON line could generate that same JSON or you wait from your web. So I'm just trying to figure out what the benefit of doing it this way versus just doing it web.
So content service. So when we talk about, actually, I think we had a slide in another deck that talks about experience fragments, content fragments. But at the base, we have assets. So the lowest level of reuse is assets, where we're going to reuse the same image across pages or across experiences. Typically, in the past, you could create a page and embed an image, embed a text, but then it's just embedded in the page, no reuse. Move the contents to assets, you can at least reuse those assets that have been curated, modified across. Then the problem was your assets were being reused, but your text wasn't. So then that's where content fragments came in. It made assets out of text. So that way you can now reuse text and images and media across. But then people were assembling those assets into HTML, but also want to reuse that HTML across pages. So that's where experience fragments comes in, where you can assemble these low-level assets into a more compound experience that they call experience fragments, and then reuse those HTML snippets now across pages. With content services, it's more about just separating the model from the view, saying that even in those experience fragments, if we have like an Alexa or other things, we don't care about view. If we have a team that manages the single page application, that maybe they're a different department in my organization, they're actually not AM developers, but they want to build an experience with our AM content, they can do that because we're separating the model from the view and use that. So the question is, is this content services, is it useful to me? It doesn't really, it's part of that ecosystem. It doesn't, we can actually refer this to, part of one of the data types I think we had is content fragment. We can actually point to a content fragment. So we can reuse images, content fragments. So at that low level, it's just a stack. And you can consume it from the top of the stack all the way through and use everything. You can kind of just go down and use assets.
I think the way AM is going is content services actually is becoming an umbrella term, right? That includes content fragments as well as the JSON rendering.
That's true. They're all
So they're
services.
trying to use content services now as sort of a more umbrella term for all those building block pieces that are not sort of site specific.
So using the FSI example, if we have 10 bank accounts, 10 credit cards, and other financial services, and maybe we're a single channel originally, we have a website. We create that website, and so there's a any mobile experience. Well, we could bring that web experience to mobile, maybe that's not necessarily what we want to do. Then one option is, well, we can create an experience fragment, which is just HTML snippets, and reuse it. But then maybe on the device, we actually want it to look different. We don't want the same view. So if we were trying to reuse the same content and view, that would make sense. But we said, no, we want to do something really different on the device. We just want the data out of it. So now we have to either get that ugly JSON out of it, or we can say, now I'm going to separate that experience fragment into the data and the experience fragment. So it's just, it's all symbiotic. If you have that, it becomes a lot easier because now it's just credit card definitions. It's just data. It's just raw data. And some of the feedback we had at Summit is, actually, if we call it a data fragment, then to the developer that made more sense. It's just data. It's not content yet. There's no experience around it. There's no concept of layout or use or intent. And if you need to have that separation, either to separate the ownership of the responsibilities, that's one reason to do it. Another reason is if you want to have a different visualization for that. And once you start getting into chatbots and Alexas, I might want to ask my Alexa, what's the newest credit card from Bank of whatever. There's no layout there, but they can consume the data part because I've extracted it. And we have a demo that we can't show that one of our guys worked on, actually one of our Aussie friends, and he did an Alexa demo. And you can go in and change the data inside of the AEM and publishes it, and Alexa will talk to that and it will respond with the new data. So there's like a few flavors of why you want to separate that. Or sometimes it's just for cleanliness. People just believe in separating the model from the view, and this is one way to do it.
How are we doing for time? Do we know?
We're probably going over.
Yeah. I know there's the video. I don't know if we have time to show that.
Yeah, maybe I can just let it play real, but I can fast forward through it.
Because that's.
I mean, we've been answering questions all the way through.
Sort of talk about what the demo is, but it's really about showing how, in this case, the use case, an app can actually consume the data in a specific way.
I don't think there's any audio on this, so I'll just talk through it. But they built a native app. In this case, they just want to see, well, how quickly can we build a native app and just pull content in and provide a visualization for this. We talked about AEM having spaces. So the interesting thing with spaces is that you can create different versions of the same content structure, whether it's for region, language, or in this case, vertical, retail versus FSI. But if that structure within it is the same, you can deliver an experience that can render regardless of region, language, or experience. So in this case, the demo starts out being retail, and it's just raw data. So this can be consumed out of the site.
Data should look the same.
The interesting thing with spaces as well, if you're doing for developers in the room, maybe we have 10 credit cards or whatever the case may be, but we might want to create a space called, I know for me, we call it the tough day test. You know, it's got a lot of data so we can check the performance of our app or our website. And by simply switching the space, we maybe have a production space that has our 10 credit cards, but maybe the other space has 10,000 of them. And we just want to see how does our app perform with that. So you could almost have a gesturing application that, or in this case here, they have a menu item to do that. You can switch spaces. So by organizing things in spaces, you can do interesting things to make the development lifecycle a little bit easier, as well as deliver different experiences. And in this case, what they've done is they have a design that is not necessarily specific to the vertical it's addressing. So at some point, we will see that they'll switch to FSI, but the app didn't have to change because it still understands the structure of the content because there's an inherent schema across the FSI and the retail demo, such that it knows what to put in the nav bar, because there's a nav bar there's other entities that drive the actual content that the community. So they're just trying to see how quickly can we create an experience that can change rapidly based off of data. That is experience back in time. I'm just using a bit of everything. They're just playing with technology and kind of the demos. Just want to pick up 60. But again, this is in the context of a native page where the actual content source is not only for authing, it's also for delivery. So it's actually consuming that raw JSON. Whereas in the context of a mobile or hybrid or web-based, that entity could be consumed within a native component or manifest HTML. Just so happens that when it's being authored, the data has already been authored by someone else and you're just creating experience. So it really can go so here's the hardware switch to the side. This is an example of sort of switching context within. One example that I want to focus on you back up, I hope it's not too distracting talking about what I did. Want to describe a scenario that we worked with somebody in FSI where they were using a mobile, organizing experiences and collections, and their marketing and authors, they want to always change the app, stay engaged, content velocity, and new products come out. They want to do sort of their own A/B testing. What I call lightweight A/B testing, where it's a very specific case where they want to try one representation over another, and not something that's complex that you can do with the Adobe target solution. And what they ended up doing is they had to create multiple collections for kind of the user. The use case was around goals. What are your financial goals? Are you saving for a home, retirement, want to buy a car, buy a boat, whatever, you have goals in life. And then there's several products that will address those goals. And then they start to, based on your goals, sort of put you inside what I call an audience, to use one of the Adobe terms. And based on that, they would give you some content, some products that would help you to end story your journey. But what ended up happening is that depending on rank your order of your goals and things like that, they want to vary the experience they gave you. But when you create collections with a fixed set of articles, you're determining a path. And they didn't want that path to be fixed and determined by an author. They wanted it to vary based on the user engagement of the application. So what we ended up doing in that case is, well, first they want to separate the model from the view, so that they have more control over the content and the experience. And based off of that, they were able to generate, one of the pages was the goals, select your goals. So they would check against all goals. Somebody may have added one, removed one, whatever the case may be. They put priorities on them as far as where they place them and play with that to see if that changes the analytics, what they've actually chosen. But based on, if I give somebody 9 goals and I select 3, based on those 3 selections, we're going to find the best products that will help you do all of that. But they wanted to do it in a simple way that the author didn't have to go in and start changing the articles and collections. They wanted the app to just figure it out. So what we ended up doing is separated into the data so that we can manage goals, products separately. And then the page that does the selection, they use the Adobe plugin, they're using local storage. So what they would do is save to local storage your selection. So I selected goal 1, 5, and 7. And then goal 1, 5, and 7 would store to local storage. And then when the products page came up, it would read local storage, see products 1, 5, and 7, know how to look into the JSON to find the right products and present a new experience. And then from there, you can choose that. And then it would bring up a series of videos and other things. So that what would have been a pretty complex content structure, and if somebody added a new goal, they would have to decide, okay, based on this new goal, and I want to show this new video, and I want to now put it in all these different permutations. It'd be a lot of management, a lot of testing involved. They made the pages, the articles themselves smarter, kind of like a single page application where it had logic, there's more of a controller in it. And they were able to reduce it to a simple set of 3-4 pages. That was kind of what I would call almost like a wizard workflow. But it could basically build off of the previous screen to generate a unique experience every time. And to test it is a lot easier as well because they can drive that experience and have an extra dialogue in pre-flight, so in preview, they would never publish that page, where they can actually make these selections ahead of time to ease with development and testing. So taking advantage of knowing, understanding how the content impacts navigation, understanding that you can take advantage of device capabilities to make some of the pages a little bit smarter. So that way the author doesn't need to be as smart. If we have a development team that can, figure out the experience that they want, we can make the technology and the experience for creating that content fit. So that way there's no friction between what the marketer needs and what the developer needs. There's a solution that can blend their goals together that afterwards seemed quite simple, but I think at first was, how can we do this? And the content structure is getting out of control and managing of it is too hard. And it became as simple as just a little logic and using localhost first so that we're maintaining some state. So that was just an example of data separation. So I'm just trying to tie in kind of content services, how that benefited us in that case, as well as the Cordova plugins, and also bridging in that whole transactional with content, because there is that aspect of bringing in a more engaging experience because the thing changes, and if the person changes their mind, they can go back and do things, and they can do all of that without having to overcomplicating the content workflow. So that demo played through. I know we've asked questions all the way through, but if there's any other questions, or we've also done talks around location services, beacons, analytics. We've been with Ian for a while, so as well, if there's other questions that are sort of.
And I threw this up just because all the content I was showing today was actually based on a lab I did at Summit. I already have that on GitHub, so if you wanted to dive deeper into what content services is, at least from what I showed today, you can check it out. There's a workbook there. A lot of information that goes deeper into what I showed today as an option. But yeah, that wraps up the formality, all the formal parts of it. So if there are questions, anything to do with AM, we can hopefully answer them.
Before the questions, let's give them a hand for. I know there's people helping up, so I think maybe you might be best one. We have lots of pizza left too. So to mingle and ask questions, and see people sort of want to stretch. So let's do the second set of questions informally. Thank you so much. Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bahay, for your presentation as well. And we hope to see you at the next event. Thank you for attending. Thank you.
A lot of questions.
We had 7 days. No, we actually go straight before. So I actually had a couple of questions. Sure. Is it possible to use smart collection? Like define filtering rules, like for we use for DAM digital assets management.
So one of our early demos for content services